The loudest revenge is silence, because nothing rattles an enemy faster than realizing they no longer have access to you. My dear chosen ones, let that quote settle in your chest for a moment, because some people didn't just lose your presence, they lost their lifeline, their leverage, their favorite playground. And now? They're stumbling backward like someone kicked the legs out from under their ego. See, when you walked away from the drama, you didn't just exit the scene, you pulled the entire stage out from beneath them. That's the kind of impact chosen ones have, even when you don't try. Chosen ones, hear me clearly. Your cutoff wasn't a whisper, it was a shockwave, the kind that leaves people blinking, spinning, replaying old conversations, trying to figure out how the person they thought they had wrapped around their finger suddenly slipped out of their grip without making a sound. And I know the question running through your mind right now. Why did they react like I snatched the earth from under them? Why is my absence louder than all the noise they made? Because, my dear chosen ones, you were the stability they didn't appreciate. You were the order inside their chaos. You were the calm that made their dysfunction feel survivable. Here's the idiomatic truth carved straight into stone. When a chosen one walks, the whole house feels the draft. You didn't tiptoe out. You unplugged the very power source. And the moment you stepped back, the lights went out, the noise died down, and they were left sitting in the dark with their own mess for the first time. That's the part they never tell you. They don't miss you. They miss what you made possible. Your patience bought them time. Your understanding softened the consequences. Your presence kept the room from collapsing in on itself. And I know another question hits you right about now. If I was doing so much holding, why did they treat me like I didn't matter? Because chosen ones carry a quiet strength that people mistake for weakness until it's gone. They thought you'd endure forever. They assumed you'd keep giving, keep forgiving, keep absorbing blow after blow. They underestimated you because they never imagined you'd choose yourself. They never considered that one day you'd stop being the safety net and become the boundary instead. Chosen ones, your walkaway wasn't drama. It was a declaration. A bold, unshakable statement that you refused to be someone's emotional landfill or energy supply. And let's be real. Some people only functioned because you were around to buffer their chaos. The moment you withdrew, everything they buried under your presence rose to the surface. That's why they're falling backward now, because your absence forced them to face themselves, unfiltered, unprotected, unmasked. Let me paint the picture for you. It's like you were holding a door shut against a storm they created. And the moment you stepped aside, not out of anger but out of exhaustion, the storm blew right back into their own face. That's what your cutoff did. It exposed what they hid, revealed what they denied, and shook the illusion they lived in. And instead of admitting they depended on your strength, they pretend you overreacted. They pretend you changed. But the truth is simpler. You finally stopped carrying weight that was never yours. My dear chosen ones, this is your reminder that your power doesn't come from how loud you speak, but from how deeply your silence hits. Your absence teaches lessons your presence tried to explain for years. Your cutoff isn't cruelty, it's clarity. It's the moment you stop negotiating your worth with people who spent theirs like it was nothing. You didn't just walk away from drama, you left with your dignity intact, and that alone is enough to make the ones who misused your loyalty fall backward in shock. And now? Now we dive into why your cutoff game is unmatched, why it shakes people to their core, why it exposes the truth they tried to bury, and why walking away wasn't weakness. It was strategy. Are you ready, chosen ones? Let's get into it. Chosen ones, before we step any deeper into this message, let me say this clearly. Your presence here isn't an accident. It's a sign that you're done carrying dead weight and ready to understand the true power behind your cutoff game. If this is hitting you already, if you can feel that shift in your chest, go ahead and tap that like button, subscribe, and drop the number 77 in the comments so I know you're one of the ones who refuses to shrink ever again. Your support keeps this movement alive, and if you want to go even further, that super thanks button is right there for you. Now, buckle in, because what you're about to hear will feel like someone finally put words to everything you've been experiencing. And trust me, if you really are a chosen one, this next part is going to hit so accurately it's almost uncomfortable. Only those built differently can understand the power of walking away from drama and watching folks fall backward from the impact. And now, let's get into it, step by step. Number 1. You didn't walk away. You shut down their access to you like a power cut they never saw coming. You didn't just walk away. You cut the power and left their whole system flickering. Nothing scares an enemy more than realizing the person they drained the most is finally done being their power source. My dear chosen ones, let's talk about what really happened when you walked away. Because you and I both know you didn't tiptoe out of that situation hoping they'd notice. You didn't slam a door, throw a scene, or announce your departure like some dramatic exit. No, you flipped a switch. You unplugged yourself from their chaos, and the moment you did, their whole operation short-circuited. And the funny part? They never saw it coming. See, chosen ones, people built entire routines around your presence. They relied on your patience, your warmth, your understanding, your ability to calm storms you didn't even create. They fed off the steadiness you brought into the room. You were the quiet generator in the background, keeping everything from blowing up. But here's the thing, generators overheat too. And while they were busy draining you, they never once imagined you'd finally pull the cord and walk off the battlefield without warning. You didn't walk away out of anger. Let's clear that up. You walked away because clarity hit you like a mirror you couldn't unsee. You started noticing how much of yourself you were giving away just to keep situations afloat. You noticed how your peace was treated like an unlimited resource, how your kindness was twisted into obligation, how your forgiveness became their permission slip. And once you saw it, once you truly understood how much of your emotional oxygen they were burning through, something shifted in you. My dear chosen ones, that shift wasn't weakness, it was awareness. It was the moment you realized, hold on, why am I the one bleeding emotionally while they stay comfortable? It was the moment you stopped explaining yourself to people who weren't listening, stopped fixing damage you didn't cause, stopped holding together relationships held up only by your effort. You didn't lose energy, you reclaimed it. And the part that hits them the hardest? The silence. Your silence was louder than any confrontation they prepared for. They were ready for the argument, the tears, the explanations, everything you used to give. But when you gave them nothing, when you exited the noise without offering closure, apology, or guilt, oh, that's what shook them. Because to them, your absence wasn't just quiet, it was catastrophic. Chosen ones, they thought you were addicted to their drama. They really believed you'd keep showing up no matter how badly they handled you. They thought your compassion made you controllable. What they didn't understand is that you were quietly gathering yourself piece by piece, getting tired of the emotional overdraft, watching patterns repeat until the truth became undeniable. And when you finally removed yourself, you didn't just leave the room, you removed their access to the very energy they were banking on. Now they sit with the shock, not because you left, but because you didn't look back, because you didn't ask how they felt, because you didn't crumble. They're rattled by the realization that you were never trapped, you were just patient. And now, that patience has expired. My dear chosen ones, this wasn't a walk-away. This was a power cut, a boundary drawn with absolute precision. And the tremors they feel now? That's what happens when the foundation they leaned on decides to finally stand up. Number 2, they mistook your calm for weakness, and now your silence is the loudest truth they've ever had to face. They took your peace for weakness, now your absence is the ghost they can't outrun. A chosen one's silence hits harder than any argument because it forces people to face the chaos they tried to blame on you. My dear chosen ones, let's break this down in a way they never expected you to understand. They thought your calm was fear. They thought your quiet was surrender. They thought your peace meant you didn't have the strength to push back. But chosen ones, what they never understood is this. Silence isn't weakness when it comes from someone who has mastered their own emotional world. Your silence was strategy. Your peace was power. And now that you're gone, they're feeling the full weight of what they misjudged. See, chosen ones, people who thrive on chaos, can't recognize calm as strength. They only understand noise, tension, reaction. So when you refused to match their volume, they convinced themselves you were intimidated. They convinced themselves you were afraid to speak up, afraid to set boundaries, afraid to walk away. But they misread your restraint as vulnerability when it was really self-control carved from growth, experience, and emotional intelligence. And now? Now your absence isn't just noticeable, it's haunting. Because when someone becomes used to your steady presence, your gentle responses, your calming influence, your emotional maturity, your disappearance becomes a mirror they can't escape. You were the one who held the room together. You were the one who diffused the tension. You were the one who absorbed the emotional blowback that wasn't even meant for you. And now that you've stepped back, they're realizing you weren't just another person in their life. You were the stabilizer they depended on without acknowledging it. Chosen ones, you were the anchor in their storm, the quiet logic when everything else around them was unraveling. They didn't respect it while they had it. They didn't appreciate the invisible work you were doing, the emotional buffering, the patience, the understanding. But the moment you stopped responding, the moment you stopped showing up, the moment you stopped playing the unspoken role they relied on, you exposed how much they leaned on you to function. This is why they can't sleep the same. It's not your vibe they miss. It's the emotional shield your presence provided. You protected them from the consequences of their own behavior without even realizing you were doing it. You softened hits they should have felt. You covered mistakes they should have learned from. You redirected storms they created themselves. And now that you're gone, those storms are hitting them full force, and they're choking on the reality you once filtered for them. What eats them alive is not losing you. It's losing the control they had when they could poke at your kindness, push your limits, and still depend on your presence. Now they're rereading old texts, replaying old moments, trying to understand how someone they underestimated slipped right out of their grip without a sound. They don't realize the answer is simple. You didn't disappear. You evolved. And evolution doesn't announce itself. It just refuses to go backward. My dear chosen ones, your peace was never passivity. It was discipline, and your absence. That's the consequence of them mistaking a calm storm for an easy target. Now they're left with the noise they created, louder than ever. And for the first time, you're not there to silence it. Number 3. Your exit didn't hurt them. It destroyed the illusion that they ever had control. Your exit didn't just shock them. It crushed the fantasy that they ever had a grip on you. Nothing rattles a manipulator more than realizing the puppet they thought they controlled was holding the scissors the whole time. My dear chosen ones, let's peel back the truth they never wanted to face. When you walked away, it didn't just catch them off guard. It snatched the mask right off their face. Because the whole time they were playing games, testing your limits, tugging at your emotions like they owned the remote. They were living inside a delusion. A delusion that you shattered the moment you decided you were done with the drama they kept recycling. See, they really believed they had you wrapped up. They thought they could drain you, guilt-trip you, confuse you, then reel you right back in with a half-hearted apology or a sudden burst of fake concern. They thought your patience was weakness. They thought your empathy meant dependence. They thought your willingness to understand them meant you didn't understand yourself. But my dear chosen ones, you saw everything. You were watching the entire time. You were reading the patterns. You were checking the math. You were quietly adding up the emotional cost of staying connected to someone who only felt powerful when you felt small. They didn't know that while they were playing their mind games, you were playing a different role: observer. They were so focused on manipulating the old version of you that they didn't notice you evolving right in front of them. They missed the moment your heart detached. They missed the moment your patience expired. They missed the moment your tolerance ran out. And by the time they realized it, you were already halfway out the door. And chosen ones, that's what shook them. Not the exit itself, but how clean, calm, and calculated it was. They expected you to explode, collapse, or cling. They expected one more argument, one more explanation, one more attempt to fix what they kept breaking. They thought they knew your reactions better than you did, but when you walked away without a speech, without closure, without negotiation, that silence hit harder than any confrontation could. Your exit wasn't emotional, it was factual. It was the final note in a song they kept replaying long after you stopped dancing to it. When you left, you weren't trying to make a point. You were the point. You didn't just walk out of a relationship, a friendship, or a family dynamic. You walked out of a system designed to keep you doubting yourself. And the moment you stepped out, the whole system collapsed, because it only worked as long as you played along. Chosen ones, here's the part that sends them spiraling. They never had power, not once, not ever. Their control was borrowed. It was temporary. It was nothing more than the space you allowed them to occupy. The moment you stopped giving the benefit of the doubt, the illusion cracked. The moment you stopped responding, the strings snapped. The moment you recognized the manipulation for what it was, you didn't just break free, you exposed the fact that they were never in control to begin with. And now, they're left scrambling, not just because you're gone, but because the truth is standing right in front of them. They misjudged the chosen one. They mistook your kindness for weakness, your consistency for dependence, your patience for permission. And now that you've reclaimed your power, the whole facade they built is crumbling at their feet. That's the impact of a chosen one's walkaway. It doesn't just remove you, it removes the delusion. And my dear chosen one, that's why they're falling backward now. Number 4. Your cutoff wasn't cold, it was self-preservation executed with precision. Your cutoff wasn't cold. It was a precision move to save your sanity. They called you cold because your warmth was no longer available to misuse. My dear chosen ones, let's make something crystal clear. What you did wasn't cruelty, pettiness, or some dramatic attempt to get attention. It was survival, executed with a level of clarity most people don't possess. They weren't there the nights you lay awake, replaying conversations, wondering why you felt so drained after spending time with someone who claimed to care. They didn't see the slow erosion of your peace, the subtle way your confidence dimmed, the growing heaviness that sat on your chest every time their name popped up on your phone. But you saw it, you felt it in your bones. And chosen ones, when your well-being starts slipping, you don't get the luxury of ignoring it. You act. They told the story like you went cold, but what actually happened was far more calculated. You finally recognized the cost of staying connected to people who chipped away at your mental clarity like it was theirs to take. You looked around and realized their presence wasn't neutral. It was corrosive. Every interaction left you a little more tired, a little more confused, a little more disconnected from yourself. And chosen ones, confusion is the first red flag. It's the fog that creeps in when someone's behavior doesn't match their words. When you're constantly trying to decode someone's intentions, that's not connection. That's erosion. You didn't cut them off to punish them. You cut them off because the version of you that stayed was slowly disappearing. And you weren't willing to sacrifice the parts of yourself that took years, even decades, to build: your peace, your progress, your emotional stability, your self-worth. The truth is, they weren't adding to your life. They were extracting from it. And chosen ones don't survive by letting the world drain them dry. You survive by recognizing when someone's access to you has become a threat to your well-being. Let's answer the question that might still be lingering in your mind. Was I too harsh? Should I have tried one more conversation? One more explanation? Absolutely not. You didn't react out of emotion. You responded out of awareness. You didn't explode. You didn't retaliate. You didn't create chaos. You simply stepped away quietly and deliberately because the environment became too toxic for your growth. They'll say you're heartless, but only because your heart was their favorite tool. They'll say you're cold, but only because they lost the warmth they took for granted. They'll call you distant, but only because they never imagined you'd have the strength to create distance. But my dear chosen ones, people who benefit from your self-sacrifice will always label your boundaries as cruelty. You weren't cold, you were courageous. You chose self-preservation over emotional entrapment. You chose clarity over confusion. You chose your peace over their chaos. And that decision, that's something you never have to apologize for. You didn't freeze them out. You simply stopped melting for people who refused to warm up. Number 5. They weren't addicted to you. They were addicted to the attention you didn't know you were giving. They didn't just want your attention. They were feeding off it like it was their only source of oxygen. Some people don't admire your energy. They drain it and call the glow support. Cut them off and watch their confidence collapse. My dear chosen ones, let's talk about something many of you still underestimate: the sheer power of your presence. You think you were just being kind, just listening, just being there. But what you didn't realize, what they hoped you never realized, is that your attention was their hidden lifeline, not your money, not your favors, not your time. It was the way you see people, the way you make others feel significant without even trying. That was the currency they were living off. Chosen ones, your presence carries a weight most people aren't built to handle. You walk into a room and the energy shifts. Suddenly people feel calmer, more grounded, more important simply because you exist near them. They didn't value you for who you were. They valued what they felt like when you were around. There's a difference. And that difference is exactly why your cut-off game has them falling backwards now. Let me put this into an idiomatic truth. They weren't in your life for connection. They were in it for the glow. Your glow made their dullness feel less obvious. Your confidence made their insecurities quieter. Your empathy made their chaos seem manageable. They were orbiting you like satellites, never shining on their own, just reflecting whatever light you gave them. And you, chosen ones, didn't even know you were feeding them. Every time you listened to their endless problems, every time you gave them the benefit of the doubt, every time you comforted them after they disappointed you, again, they absorbed it like fuel. But they didn't absorb it to grow. They absorbed it to avoid doing the work themselves. They mirrored your healing language, mimicked your emotional progress, rehearsed your vocabulary as if copying your growth would magically become their own. But here's the truth: they weren't improving, they were pretending, and pretending requires a power source. That source was you. So when you finally stopped replying, when you stopped explaining yourself, when you decided your peace was worth more than their constant need for validation, it was like pulling the plug on a house full of electronics. Everything went silent, everything went dark. Their confidence flickered, their sense of self evaporated. Because what they projected while standing next to you was never theirs. It was a borrowed identity they stitched together from your energy. Chosen ones, this is why they're irritated now, confused, maybe even angry. They aren't angry that you left. They're angry that now they have to face what they've been avoiding, the emptiness behind their performance. They don't miss you. They miss the person they got to pretend to be when you were around. You didn't just walk away. You exposed the illusion. You showed them their strength was a shadow cast by your presence. You revealed that without your energy, they don't shine. They struggle. And now they sit in the echo of everything they once fed off but never appreciated. Because chosen ones, when you finally unplug, the ones who depended on your light always fall backward. They always do. Number 6. When you walked away, you revealed who was quietly relying on you just to stay balanced. When you walked away, you didn't just leave, you exposed who was running on your energy like a hidden life support. Nothing reveals the truth faster than removing yourself. The moment a chosen one steps back, the mask slips, the room shifts, and suddenly people can't hide what your presence was covering. My dear chosen ones, let's talk about the moment everything changed, the moment you walked away from the drama. Because what you did wasn't just a step back, it wasn't a time out. It wasn't a pause, it was a full-on power outage for people who had been secretly running off your emotional electricity without ever admitting it. And the second you unplugged, oh, they felt it, hard. You weren't trying to expose anybody, you were just trying to breathe. Chosen ones always do that, pull back to heal, recharge, regain clarity. But in doing so, something undeniable surfaced. They were starving long before you ever left. They were just using your stability, your presence, your emotional strength to hide it. You didn't realize it at the time, but you were the anchor in situations where everything else was drifting. You were the one keeping balance when other people's inner worlds were collapsing. You were the steady heartbeat in rooms full of anxiety and insecurity. And the wild part? They thought it was effortless for you. They thought your calm was just your personality. They never understood that calm was something you worked for, something you protected, something you earned through your own journey. But people get comfortable leaning on chosen ones. They get used to the quiet support, the emotional structure, the subtle way you prevent chaos from exploding. And because chosen ones don't brag about what they provide, others forget the weight you're carrying. They forget until the day you decide you're done being their silent safety net. Chosen ones, the moment you pulled back, everything they were hiding behind your presence collapsed. Their emotional chaos suddenly had nothing to cling to. The noise inside them got louder. The confusion they ignored became impossible to escape. They weren't just uncomfortable, they were lost. Because your presence wasn't just comforting, it was compensating. It was filling gaps they never bothered to fill themselves. And now that you're gone, they're exposed. Not because you embarrassed them, not because you made a scene, but because your absence ripped away the illusion they were hiding behind. They thought they were whole until the day your energy stopped lighting up their cracks. Let's call it what it is. They were surviving off you, off your insight, off your emotional maturity, off your ability to stay grounded. And while they were labeling you as too sensitive, or too deep, or too much, the truth was this: your depth was the very thing keeping them from drowning. Now they're sitting in real silence, not the peaceful kind, the kind that echoes, the kind that forces you to face yourself with no buffer, no shield, no chosen one holding the pieces together. And that's when the truth hits them. They never built their own strength. They relied on yours. So yes, my dear chosen ones, your walk-away exposed exactly who was leaning on you just to feel normal. You didn't shame them. You didn't attack them. All you did was step back, and in doing so, you revealed the truth they never wanted to confront. They weren't whole without you, because they never learned to cultivate their own inner light. That's the power of your cut-off game. It doesn't just remove you, it reveals everything. Number 7. Your boundaries didn't push them away. They exposed everything they refused to fix. Your boundaries didn't push them away. They exposed everything they were trying to hide. Nothing shakes a person faster than seeing their own behavior reflected back at them with no place left to run. My dear chosen ones, let's get something straight. The moment you set a real boundary, the whole room shifted. And it wasn't because you suddenly became difficult or demanding. No, you simply stopped being their emotional padding, their excuse, their free pass. You drew a line that said, "This is where I end. This is where your behavior is no longer allowed to cross." And the moment you did that, you turned into a mirror they weren't prepared to look into. See, chosen ones, people get comfortable when you let their behavior slide. They get used to you absorbing the jabs, overlooking the comments, brushing off the shade, and swallowing the tension. They mistake your tolerance for approval. They mistake your empathy for permission. But the moment you stop shrinking to make others comfortable, the moment you stop smoothing out their chaos with your own peace, they don't just get defensive, they get exposed, because your boundary didn't only protect you, it revealed them. Let me tell you why they reacted the way they did. When you said enough, it forced them to confront everything they've been avoiding. The emotional games, exposed. The guilt trips masquerading as concern, exposed. The disrespect they tried to downplay, exposed. And instead of acknowledging the truth, staring them in the face, they panicked. They flipped the script. Suddenly you were too sensitive, doing too much, or acting different. But my dear chosen ones, you and I both know the truth. You didn't change. You just stopped participating in the dysfunction. Chosen ones, you stopped walking on eggshells around people who stomped all over your boundaries like they were nothing. You stopped explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You stopped carrying blame that was never yours. And your silence, your firm, unbending silence, rattled them harder than any argument ever could. It wasn't resistance they felt. It was reality. And here's the part they'll never admit. Your boundary highlighted the gap between who they pretend to be and who they actually are. Your refusal to play along revealed everything they didn't want to see. You became the mirror they couldn't escape, and that terrified them, because in your clarity their chaos was unmistakable. In your calm, their insecurity was visible. In your standard, their lack of self-awareness was undeniable. They weren't angry at your boundary. They were angry at what it revealed. They weren't upset because you had expectations. They were upset because those expectations forced them to grow, evolve, or get left behind. And most people aren't ready for that. Instead of rising to meet your standard, they demonized you for having one. But my dear chosen ones, hear this and hear it deeply. Their reaction is not your responsibility. Their unhealed parts are not your burden. Their discomfort is not your failure. What your boundary did was simple. It showed them who they are when you stop cushioning the impact of their behavior. That's not rejection, that's revelation, and it's a revelation only the chosen ones have the courage to deliver. Number 8. You didn't avoid their drama. You unplugged the entire chaos machine. You didn't walk away from the drama. You pulled the plug and left their chaos running on empty. Nothing terrifies a manipulator more than the moment their favorite target stops reacting. My dear chosen ones, let's get one thing straight. You didn't just walk away from drama. You shut it down like a master switch. You didn't retreat. You didn't cower. You didn't give up. You simply realized that the chaos swirling around you wasn't accidental. It was engineered, crafted, designed to keep you emotionally hooked while everyone else fed off the reactions you never should have been giving in the first place. They thought you were part of the game because you kept showing up to the battlefield. But chosen ones, you weren't a participant. You were the power supply. You kept the whole illusion running. And the day you figured that out, the whole system malfunctioned. You started noticing the patterns. The same arguments recycled with new wording, the sudden affection after disrespect, the "I'm sorry" that didn't come with change, the strategic silences meant to keep you chasing peace, the guilt trips wrapped as concern. That wasn't a relationship, that wasn't friendship, that wasn't love. It was emotional chess, and you were the piece they underestimated. But one day, something clicked inside of you. And it wasn't rage, it wasn't bitterness, it was recognition. This isn't conflict, this is conditioning. This isn't misunderstanding, this is manipulation. You stopped falling for the bait. You stopped explaining your heart to people committed to misunderstanding it. You stopped showing up to conversations that were never meant to bring resolution, only to drain your energy like a siphon. And when you stopped responding, oh, chosen ones, that's when the glitch hit. It was like yanking wires out of a machine mid-operation. Suddenly the gears jammed, the scripts they rehearsed stopped working. The control they relied on evaporated. Their confusion grew louder because they had studied your reactions like a playbook, and you closed the book on them. They pushed buttons that used to send you spiraling, but now nothing happened. They poked wounds that used to bleed, but now you healed. They tried to bait you back into the storm, but your weather forecast changed. That's when they realized the truth. Without your emotional reactions, their chaos had no fuel. Chosen ones, unplugging from drama wasn't easy. You had to detox from the urge to defend yourself, to be understood, to try one more time to fix what wasn't yours to fix. Every inch of your growth demanded discipline, but you knew deep down that giving them another chance would only offer them another opportunity to drain you. And when you finally held firm, when you finally stopped feeding the loop, the whole thing collapsed. Not subtly, not slowly, it crashed. Because without your steady energy to absorb the damage, all the dysfunction they kept hiding under your patience came rushing to the surface. You didn't just walk away, you made the entire chaos network lose power. And now, they're stuck sitting in the silence they used to run from, the silence they once filled with noise, and for the first time ever, they're realizing that the real stability in the room was you. My dear chosen ones, that is why your cutoff game hits like a seismic wave. You didn't abandon them. You abandoned the chaos they lived off of. And that's exactly why they fell backward the moment you stepped forward. Number 9. They never wanted the whole you, only the pieces they could control, so you left with all of yourself intact. They wanted you present, but in pieces, so you walked away whole and left them holding nothing. They didn't fear losing you. They feared you finally gathering every piece of yourself they were hoping to keep scattered. My dear chosen ones, let's break this down in a way that hits with precision. Some people never wanted the complete version of you. They only wanted the version they could bend, mold, guilt-trip, and manipulate. They wanted you dependent. They wanted you doubtful. They wanted you soft enough to tolerate their behavior, but loyal enough to never walk away. They weren't looking for a partner, a friend, or a teammate. They were looking for someone they could siphon strength from while calling it connection. Chosen ones. Here's the truth they hoped you'd never see. They were comfortable as long as you were fragmented, as long as you doubted your worth, as long as you kept shrinking to fit into the tiny space they created for you. They wanted your kindness, but not your boundaries, your love, but not your standards, your presence, but not your power. Why? Because your power exposed their insecurities, your strength highlighted their weaknesses, and your completeness, your wholeness, left no room for their games. You might be wondering right now, why would someone claim to care about me but secretly prefer me broken? Because when you're broken, you're easier to manage. When you're tired, you don't resist. When you're confused, you cling. When you're drained, you stop asking for more. They didn't want the whole you because the whole you doesn't settle. The whole you doesn't stick around for half-hearted effort. The whole you doesn't play small to keep the peace. But here's where the shift happened, my dear chosen ones. You started noticing the pattern. You started realizing how every compliment came with a condition, how every moment of care came with a catch, how every so-called apology was just a reset button for the next round of chaos. You saw how they chipped away at your confidence, your identity, your emotional balance, not out of love, but out of convenience. And instead of breaking, you started collecting yourself, one boundary at a time, one truth at a time, one realization at a time. You gathered the pieces of you they tried to scatter, the pieces they labeled too emotional, the pieces they called too much, the pieces they dismissed as overreacting. You took them back, every single one. So when you walked away, you didn't leave behind the version of yourself they were hoping to keep. You left with everything, your clarity, your dignity, your strength, your voice, your identity. You walked out fully assembled, and that's what hit them hardest. Because chosen ones, there is nothing more terrifying to someone who fed on your insecurity than seeing you whole, steady, and unapologetic. It wasn't your absence that shook them, it was the completeness of your exit. The fact that you didn't crawl away, you didn't stumble away, you didn't break on the way out. You walked with your back straight, your head high, and your soul intact. You reminded them that you were never theirs to break. You were simply lending them pieces you didn't need anymore. And now they're left with the empty space where your fragmented self once stood. But you, chosen one, you're finally whole, and that is the ending they never prepared for. Number 10. They expected you to tolerate the cycle forever, not level up and outgrow it. They expected you to endure forever. They never saw your evolution coming. Nothing shakes people harder than realizing the person they depended on to stay small finally chose to grow. My dear chosen ones, this is the part they never admit out loud. They didn't believe you had the courage to evolve. They didn't think you had the strength to rise, to shift, to rethink your role. They expected you to endure, quietly, obediently, endlessly. In their minds, you were the steady one, the reliable one, the one who bent so others didn't have to. You were the glue they took for granted, the foundation they never reinforced, the emotional cushion they punched but expected to stay soft. To them, your role was predictable: endure, excuse, explain, forgive, repeat. You were supposed to be the character in their script who never changed scenes, never learned new lines, never rewrote the ending they planned for you. They weren't expecting evolution, they were relying on your endurance, relying on you to be too loyal, too patient, too exhausted to break the cycle. But oh, chosen ones, you flipped the whole story. You didn't just survive them, you outgrew them. And nothing terrifies people more than the version of you they can't manipulate anymore. Your growth wasn't loud. It wasn't some dramatic display they could point at and call you crazy for. No, your growth was subtle. It was the kind of evolution that happens quietly at first, like when you start questioning the things you used to accept, when you finally acknowledge the patterns you once tolerated, when you feel your tolerance shrinking and your standards rising. Your evolution whispered before it roared. You learned when to speak up and when to walk away. You learned the difference between being supportive and being used. You learned that self-respect isn't selfish, it's survival. And while your growth was unfolding, they remained clueless because they never expected someone they labeled strong enough to handle anything to realize they shouldn't have to handle everything. Chosen ones, when you evolved, you didn't just change your behavior. You changed your expectations. You stopped being available for the mess. You stopped being their emergency contact for emotional chaos. You stopped being the human sponge absorbing everyone's dysfunction. And the moment that shift happened, their control slipped like sand through their fingers. They weren't prepared. Because your endurance didn't just support them, it enabled them. And when you stopped enduring, their whole system collapsed. They no longer had the emotional laborer, the fixer, the reliable fallback. They faced a version of you who refused to stay in the box they built. A version who didn't need their approval to move forward. A version who no longer asked, "What will happen if I leave?" but instead declared, "Look at what happens when I do." Your evolution rewrote the rules. It removed their entitlement. It forced them to see that you were never theirs to maintain. You were simply someone they underestimated. And that's why your evolution is the most powerful cutoff of all. Because while they were waiting for you to break, you were busy breaking free. My dear chosen ones, remember this. You didn't just outgrow the drama. You outgrew the version of yourself that tolerated it. And that is what sent them falling backward the hardest. Number 11. You didn't just leave the room. You took the stability, the clarity, and the atmosphere with you. You didn't just leave the room. You took the whole atmosphere with you and left them gasping in their own noise. The moment a chosen one steps out, the room doesn't just get quiet. It collapses under the weight of its own truth. My dear chosen ones, let's break this down in a way that hits exactly where it needs to. Because when you leave a space, you don't just remove your body. You remove gravity. You remove stability. You remove the invisible force that was holding the cracks together while everyone else pretended everything was fine. You were the emotional architecture of that room, and the moment you walked away, the entire structure tilted. They thought you were just another presence, another face, another voice, another placeholder in the background. They never realized you were the thermostat controlling the temperature of everything around you. You were the calm in the storm, the clarity in the confusion, the grounding force in a room full of unstable personalities pretending they were okay. And when you finally walked away, chosen one, you took the air with you. You took the balance. You took the emotional oxygen that kept everyone else breathing easier than they deserved. Now the silence they're sitting in? Oh, it's not peaceful. It's sharp. It's uncomfortable. It's the kind of silence that exposes everything they tried to bury under your presence. Without you there to smooth things over, suddenly the tension is louder, the awkwardness is heavier, the truths they avoided show up uninvited, conversations feel disjointed, people feel off balance. And that's not coincidence, chosen one, that's impact. You weren't just in the environment, you were the environment. Your presence didn't just fill the room, it shaped it. You created a space where people felt safe enough to be real, yet stable enough to not fall apart. Your voice cut through noise like a blade, your energy softened edges they refused to admit were sharp, and your calm stopped situations from spiraling into chaos long before anyone realized chaos was even brewing. But they didn't appreciate that. They got used to feeling better simply because you walked in. They got used to leaning on a steadiness they didn't earn or contribute to. And when you finally decided you were done holding together rooms that kept trying to fall apart, they felt that loss like a punch to the chest. Now the room feels hollow. The atmosphere feels heavy. The comfort is gone. Not because you were loud or dramatic or demanding attention. Chosen ones don't need theatrics to shift a space. You were powerful in a way that didn't announce itself. You were the quiet equilibrium that made everything feel manageable, and the moment you withdrew, everything and everyone became exposed. People's true colors start showing when your influence disappears. The masks slip, the facades weaken, the fake confidence trembles. Because without your grounding energy, they're stuck facing themselves, raw, messy, and unfiltered. And that's the part they'll never admit. They don't just miss you, they miss who they were when you were there. Remember this, my dear chosen ones, your absence is not emptiness, it's revelation. It shows who was truly stable and who was borrowing stability from you. It exposes dynamics that only worked because you held them together. And as you rise, as you walk away from drama, never forget, you didn't lose that room. The room lost you. Now they sit in the atmosphere you left behind, one they can't control, can't fix, and can't escape. Because the truth is simple. When a chosen one leaves, everyone else finally has to face themselves. And now, chosen ones, as we bring this message home, let this settle in your mind. Walking away from drama didn't weaken you. It revealed your strength in a way nothing else could. The shockwaves people feel now are proof of the impact you carry without even trying. If this resonated with you, if you felt your own story between these words, make sure you like this video, subscribe, and drop the number 77 in the comments so I know you're one of the real ones. And don't forget to share this with another chosen one who needs this reminder.